Welcome! Today we are redesigning the Ghost of Christmas Present. Yay! Now, I already had this entire part recorded and everything, and I went through the story, but I accidentally deleted the file, and I can't get it back. So, for now we're going to stare at this image, and I, with editing magic, am going to highlight the different things as I talk about them. But yeah, I have lost it, so we're just gonna re-record it. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time he lay upon his bed, the very core and center of a blaze of ruddy lights, which streamed upon it when the clock proclaimed the hour, and which, being only light, was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, as he was powerless to make out what it meant, or would be at, and was sometimes apprehensive that he might be, at that very moment, an interesting case of spontaneous combustion, without having the consolation of knowing it. At last, however, he began to think, as you or I would have thought at first, for it is always the person not in the predicament who knows what ought to have been done in it, and would unquestionably have done it too. At last, I say, he began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, upon further tracing it, it seemed to shine. This idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by his name, and bade him enter. He obeyed. It was his own room, there was no doubt about that, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back upon the light, as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there, and such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney, as that dull petrification of a hearth had never known in Scrooge's time, or Marley's, or for many and many a winter season gone. Heaped upon the floor to form a kind of throne, were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, great joints of meat, sucking pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense 12th cakes, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up, high up, to shield its light upon Scrooge as he came peeping round the door. "Come in!" exclaimed the ghost. "Come in and know me better, man." Scrooge entered timidly, and hung his head before the spirit. He was not dogged Scrooge he had been, and though the spirit's eyes were clear and kind, he did not like to meet them. "I am the ghost of Christmas Present," said the spirit. "Look upon me." Scrooge reverently did so. It was clothed in one simple green robe, or mantle, bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capricious breast was bare, as if disdaining to be warded or concealed by any artifice. Its feet, absorbable beneath the ample folds of the garment, were also bare, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful air. Girded round its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. So, to begin, I obviously had to place him sitting on the pile of meat that's mentioned, because it just helps give a little bit of setting to who he is. And based on the Disney version of the Christmas Carol, he never really leaves that pile and he kind of pilots Scrooge's house, which I think is a neat idea, and I'm not quite sure if I want to keep that part of it or not. But he's a very welcoming and opening figure, so I wanted to keep his pose wide and welcoming. And you'll see in a moment, I follow pretty much the design that is given in the book. I think the Ghost of Christmas Present is the easiest one to design because we're given what he looks like already. There's not really a way to deviate from that. But for his face, I'll keep the eyes the same as the Ghost of Christmas Past, these kind of solid doll-like black pupils. But I really wanted to exaggerate that this is someone who is filled with excess and has access to that, which is why he has such a plump body. And even his face, it's 2 large spheres. Now I have him holding the Horn of Plenty, which is what I'm interpreting his torch thingy to be. And you'll see here I'm redesigning it. There are different ideas about torches, goat horns, but personally I really like this curvy design. And it like that. So I went ahead and used that. And then the fire that comes out of it, I thought would start off blazing really hot. And as the day of Christmas went on, it wanes. Because another part in the book, the Ghost of Christmas Present asks Scrooge if Scrooge has met any of his brothers. And Scrooge is like, I don't think so. How many brothers do you got? And then the ghost asks Scrooge, what year is it? So if it was this year, he'd be like, Scrooge, what year is it? And Scrooge would say, it's 2026. So then the Ghost of Christmas Present would be like, I have 2025 brothers. And because that's a representation, each year gets a new Ghost of Christmas Present. So tying the lifespan of our Ghost of Christmas Present to the fire on the torch, I think would be a good way to show. And then I came up also with the idea, the Ghost of Christmas Past is largely based on a candle and has a lot of fire. So after the Ghost of Christmas Present passes on because the day of Christmas ends, he becomes a tiny ball of fire. And I'll show a drawing of this later so it'll make more sense later. And that tiny ball of fire joins Christmas Past's entourage of candle fire things. And now you can see here I'm drawing on that torch. It's a little tricky because the curve of the handle makes it difficult to grasp. So it's a good thing Christmas Present has such large hands. He's able to wrap around the wide base of the torch. You'll notice as I go on with the design, I don't give him a scabbard like in the book. And I feel like back then a scabbard made sense because they didn't have weapons like we do now, like guns, laser shooter things, tasers, pepper spray. But now, because we have that large array, I don't think anyone would hold a scabbard and immediately be like, oh, that's a dangerous weapon. So that's why I decided to exclude it. I don't know, maybe I'll include it later, but I go back and forth on it. I also gave him a kind of under shirt, which you'll see later on, because it didn't really make sense to me to have him bare-chested. I feel like, human decency might be important. I just never really liked that particular part of the design. So I gave him a dark blue tunic. Oh, I guess I should also mention, I can't really put colors in here, but I'm imagining instead of dark brown for his hair, I imagine it to be dark orange, auburny kind of color, to further tie into the fact that at the end of the day, of the Christmas day, the ghost of Christmas present becomes a fireball that follows around the ghost of Christmas past. Because the ghost of Christmas past is the culmination of all the past Christmas presents. And then to that end, the ghost of Christmas future is also going to have some kind of fire imagery, because the ghost of Christmas future would be all the future Christmas presents. So I imagine it as time goes on, the ghost of Christmas future becomes more diminished, and the ghost of Christmas past becomes larger, and Christmas present is kind of just the same, because he's just one guy who gets reborn every year. But I think there's also an interesting parallel between the ghost of Christmas present and Jesus. I don't know what I'll do with that, but something I wanted to point out, because the way Christmas present speaks, he speaks like he is a divine religious deity-esque person. And it makes sense, since Charles Dickens is Christian, and a large reason why Christmas exists is to celebrate the birth of Christ. Therefore, it would make sense if the very first Christmas present was Jesus Christ, or at least some kind of representation of Jesus Christ. Ideas. So you can see I'm doing his robe now. And yeah, I stuck with the inspiration from the original book pretty closely. I mean, also in the description, it literally describes him wearing a flowing green robe with white trim. There's not really much you can deviate from in that regard. You could add more embroidery, but I think just a simple tunic, simple robe of green makes the most sense. Embroidery makes it more complicated to draw, and I imagine if there were embroidery anywhere, it would probably be along the edges, and it might detail each year of Christmas. That way, as each different ghost of Christmas present appears, he gets another detail to recall the ghosts of present that came before him. Another thing I was thinking of is the wreath of holly that the ghost of Christmas present has. The room, when he comes in, it's described to have leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy. So in his wreath, I decided to put one cluster of holly at the forehead to kind of represent the peak, but then the sides of it have those leaves from the different plants. And of course his robe is green. So the overall vibe of the Ghost of Christmas Present is green. And I think it's also a neat tie-in to the Ghost of Christmas Past, who has leaves of holly, but also is starting to have summer flowers come up. So thinking about those, I think I want to carry that theme of holly over to Ghost of Christmas Future, where instead of having holly in its fruit form, Ghost of Christmas Future will probably have the holly flower as the beginning. And then Ghost of Christmas Present has the actual berries. And then Ghost of Christmas Past still has the berries, but is also starting to get other plants as spring comes. Because in the northern poles, where Charles Dickens would have written this tale, spring comes after winter. And winter is when the Christmas season is. You might also notice in the other picture that there were kind of like this sketched outline of two kids under Christmas Present's robe. And you may have seen my writing, which listed what the kids are. The boy is ignorance, the girl is want. And then they are yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, and wolfish in appearance. So you'll see where they come in. I don't know if I'll have time for it in this video. But in this particular scene, Christmas Present doesn't have them under his robe. And again, taking inspiration from Disney's version of A Christmas Carol, where there is no kids under the robe at first. But after they start walking around, then they go under the robe. I like to think Christmas Present shelters ignorance and want during the Christmas season, because allegedly everyone's in good spirits. And then as soon as he dies, they suddenly come back and start taking over. You can see me cleaning up some of my lines here. Working on building the layering of his cloak. Because that's the tricky thing. I want the fabric to look thick, but also not stiff. And then I'm not the best at drawing human figures, so trying to make it snug is a bit of a challenge for me. You can see I've also given him some sandals on his feet, which again is to kind of further deviate a little bit from the original where he's barefooted. I've put sandals because I think that ties in better with his role in kind of like Jesus inspired. Sandals were something that people from the biblical ages would wear. So I think that makes it make more sense. But also, it feels weird just leaving him barefoot. And you see here I go in the face. You can see that where the eyes are now. And the nose is a circle, because circle noses He's a very jolly guy. He reminds me a lot of Santa Claus. So you can look at the stop motion Santa Clauses, and that's kind of where I decided this is how we're going to get his facial shape. And you'll see he's got his beard, and I ended up deciding 5 curves on the beard and 5 curves on the mustache, just to make it more consistent as I draw. And you'll notice that there is no mouth, and if you've ever seen like a cartoon where there's just a character with no mouth but a big mustache, that's kind of where I was going with that. When he talks, you'll see the mustache kind of move. If he's like laughing with his mouth really wide open, then you might see some of his mouth. But for the moment, just the mustache is how you know he's talking or not. And the mustache curves up if he's smiling, curves down if he's frowning. Christmas Present gets very temperamental in the later half of the book. Spoiler warning if you somehow have not seen one of the bajillion adaptations of the Christmas Carol or the references. But at the end of the day, Christmas Present ages to be really old. And I can't remember if ignorance and want kill him. Is kill the right word? But ignorance and want overpower him. But he gets really cynical at Scrooge because Scrooge he makes a comment earlier, are there no poorhouses? Are there no prisons for the homeless of the people to live? And so then at the end of the book, or the trip Christmas Present takes Scrooge on, Scrooge and Present are looking at Bob Cratchit and his son Tiny Tim. And Scrooge is like, Spirit, please tell me the boy is okay. And the Spirit throws Scrooge's words back at him like, why do you care? You very clearly said that you don't care about the poor people of the world. They should just die or go to a prison or a workhouse, which is basically a prison. And Scrooge feels bad about it. But the way Christmas Present throws back those words at Scrooge, it makes Scrooge think about his own cruelty. But it also shows that Christmas Present can get really scary if he wants to be. I tried to draw the food that he was sitting on, and then I got tired of drawing the food he was sitting on, so I just wrote food. You'll notice I also gave Christmas Present the same ears as Christmas Past has. Sorry, I didn't give Christmas Past ears. But Christmas Present has kind of these elfish ears, which if Christmas Past had ears, I think they would also be elfish, kind of. Because they're not human, they're spirits. Charles Dickens calls them ghosts, but ghost is just another word for spirit. But the ears are also kind of similar to the Ghost of Christmas Present from Scrooge in the movie they released, the new one, in 2023, I believe. I think it's fitting that he's got elfish ears because, again, not human. He's a spirit, and then it kind of relates back to that mysticism of these guys are figures of Christmas, not actual people. But I might not keep that. I might bury it under hair so you don't have to know what kind of ear, because we won't see the Ghost of Christmas Future's ears either. Anywho, you can see I'm shading now. I also forgot to draw the belt on, until it was too late. Well, past the shading, I think. And I was thinking, what other details did I forget? And then I was like, oh, right, the belt. So on the belt, because I feel like ignorance and want kind of come out of nowhere, which makes sense for the pacing of the story, but I wanted to kind of hint at these things. So you have the hint from the holly berries about his connection to the other two ghosts of Christmas past and future. You have the hints of how he talks in relation to what he is. I took away the meaning of the sword scabbard, so then I wanted to add the meaning of ignorance and want, and I did that by putting a belt buckle on him. And you'll see in a bit when I draw it, on the right side of the belt buckle, I have want, and on the left side, I have ignorance. And they're just kind of caricatures. They're the basic outlines. And the ignorance is looking up and screaming. And then want is looking down and kind of sighing, is what his expression, I think, fits best. But it's small, and it's not meant to be seen, except if you're looking at it very closely. I also ended up putting this kind of like leopard pattern that you see on like royal robes to put on his white robe. And I end up not keeping that in the final cut because he's not royalty. And especially if we go off the vein that he's kind of representing Jesus, he wouldn't even put himself up on a pedestal like that, because Jesus was very pointedly not letting himself be treated any higher than a normal person. So likewise, I don't think Christmas present would do the same. And then at this point, I kind of got some brainstorming about his facial expressions. Because again, Christmas present, all the ghosts of Christmas have these really intense moments. So for Christmas present's intense moment, not only like is his beard like his one indicator of expression, but I wanted to also have the poofs on his hair sharpen to further add expression. Because now it's not just, oh, I'm just a silly little Santa Claus-like figure. Then it becomes sharp and it's like, I am angry. But yes. It's also occurring to me that I didn't put icicles in his wreath head. I don't know if I want to include icicles. I see the idea. I understand where it's beneficial, but I think no icicles just kind of simplifies the design and gets it across better. I might play around with that later on. I don't really see a purpose for the icicles symbolic-wise, so I decided to drop them from the design. Now you see where I draw the belt. Oh wait, I'm going to make a note about the fire. Yeah, as the day passes, the torch's fire slowly drains. And then at the end of the day, and also Christmas presents face and beard gain streaks of gray hair as he ages. But here's the belt buckle now. Based also on Disney's A Christmas Carol, when Scrooge points out that Christmas present has no scabbard, Christmas present kind of looks down at the scabbard and is like, oh, huh, where? I didn't realize I didn't have a scabbard. What a silly thing. So I imagine, because again, each Christmas present is kind of born again every year, I imagine that each Christmas present might not have the knowledge about like all the things going on. They just know that they're there to witness the goings on of Christmas in their year. So that belt buckle, it's a hint to the viewers about ignorance and want, a little bit of foreshadowing. But it also serves a purpose to remind presents about, hey, in the world there's ignorance and want. And then, again, based on the movies, he doesn't start with them under his robe. Like, we see him warm, welcoming, inviting, and they're not under his robe. Later on in the day, he somehow acquires them. So maybe that's something that he seeks out. So for the holiday of Christmas, he helps people forget about their desire to want and forget about their ignorance, and instead give them the opportunity to celebrate and enjoy this holiday to the fullest. So now his belt is kind of a reminder that he has to go and find them. And now I'll leave. Enjoy the speed paint. here's the final drawing of Christmas present. Now, you'll notice the shading here is different than what I did for Christmas past. He's got more realistic shading, which he's not a candle. So, of course, he obeys the lighting laws a bit better than Christmas past does. And you'll notice I also have him sitting on top of a pile of garbage food instead of the rich delicacies. I didn't want to draw the rich delicacies, but it also provides an interesting commentary on we in the modern day have kind of commercialized Christmas and gotten rid of the things that made it fulfilling. Then again, what do I know? That's just my speculation. Now here also is the fire I was talking about earlier, and if you'll notice, this process that I'm using to make it is kind of the same design flow I went through to make the fire in the Ghost of Christmas Presents torch. And I think that gives it a unique parallel to where does Christmas Presents fiery form come from. Yep, the video got a little long, so I wasn't able to put in Ignorance and Want and show the design process for them. But if you subscribe, like, comment, I'll post another video about them shortly. Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you think. Is this a good design? Would you have changed anything? And yeah, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.